Please, Ryan, don't walk away from me like I walked away from you. Claire Bennett's voice broke beneath the gold lights of the Arden Hotel, where the marble floor was so polished it reflected her tears before anyone dared to look at her face. Just an hour earlier, the ballroom behind her had been filled with soft piano music, crystal glasses, quiet applause, and the kind of money that never needed to introduce itself. Now the music had faded into a distant hum behind closed doors, and all that remained was Claire standing in front of a private elevator, one hand pressed against her chest, as if she could hold together whatever had finally cracked inside her. Across from her stood Ryan Caldwell, the man she had once called her husband, the man she had once left with a signed divorce paper and a silence colder than winter in Chicago. He looked different now, not in the loud way people changed when they wanted revenge, but in the still way a mountain looked different after a storm had passed. His black suit fit cleanly across his shoulders, his white shirt was crisp, and his navy tie sat perfectly beneath his collar. His short hair was neatly combed, his jaw calm, his eyes steady. He did not look surprised to see her crying. Somehow, that hurt Claire more than anger would have. Behind them, guests drifted through the lobby in small groups, speaking in low voices, pretending not to watch while watching everything. A hotel attendant stood near the elevator with a leather folder in his hands, eyes lowered with professional discretion. Outside the tall glass walls, Manhattan glittered in the cold evening air, yellow taxis sliding along the avenue like streaks of light. Claire had imagined this night differently. She had arrived beside Mark Ellison, wearing a white dress and a careful smile, expecting champagne, photographs, and another performance of the life she had chosen after Ryan. She had not expected to hear Ryan's name spoken from the stage with reverence. She had not expected to see his company logo shining above the room. She had not expected senators, hospital executives, and board members to stand when he entered. Most of all, she had not expected the man she once thought was not enough to become the person everyone else seemed honored to know. "I was wrong," she whispered, taking one step toward him. Her heels clicked softly against the marble, a small sound swallowed by the size of the lobby. "I should have believed in you. I should have stayed." Ryan's hand rested at his side, relaxed, not reaching for her, not pulling away. His wedding ring was gone, of course. Hers was gone too. Yet in that moment, Claire felt the empty space on her finger more sharply than she had in 14 months. She searched his face for the Ryan she remembered, the tired man at the kitchen table, the one who used to look up from his laptop with red eyes and still ask if she had eaten dinner. But the man in front of her was not begging to be understood anymore. He was not waiting for her approval. He was simply present, composed, unreachable in a way that felt almost gentle. "I didn't know," Claire said, and the words sounded small even to her. Ryan looked at her for a long second, long enough for the lobby lights to tremble in the shine of her eyes. Then he said quietly, "No, Claire, you didn't want to know." The elevator behind him opened with a soft chime. Warm light spilled across the floor between them like a line she could no longer cross. 14 months earlier, she had left him with nothing but a signed divorce paper, a returned apartment key, and one sentence he never forgot. 14 months earlier, Chicago was buried under a late February cold that made the windows of their 600-square-foot apartment sweat from the inside. The radiator hissed near the wall like an old man trying to breathe, and the kitchen light flickered above a table crowded with unpaid envelopes, investor notes, a half-empty mug of black coffee, and Ryan Caldwell's open laptop glowing long after midnight. Claire stood by the sink with her arms folded, her short brown hair tucked behind one ear, watching the man she had married stare at another spreadsheet as if numbers could love him back. Ryan wore the same white shirt he had put on that morning, the sleeves rolled unevenly to his elbows, his tie loosened and forgotten around his neck. He had come home from a meeting on the other side of the city with salt stains on his shoes and hope still in his voice, telling her that a hospital network might take a second look at his logistics platform, that one serious contract could change everything, that they only needed a little more time. Claire had heard those words so often they no longer sounded like hope. They sounded like rent due on Monday. They sounded like dinner reheated twice. They sounded like another evening alone while her husband chased a future that never seemed to arrive. On the refrigerator, held by a weak magnet from a trip to Lake Geneva, was a photograph from their wedding day. In it, Ryan was smiling in a way he rarely smiled anymore, one hand around her waist, his eyes bright with the kind of faith that did not ask for proof. Claire looked at the picture, then at the man hunched over the table, and something inside her tightened. She had not always been cruel to his dreams. In the beginning, she used to bring him coffee at 2 in the morning, sit barefoot on the rug beside him, and listen while he explained routes, data, delivery delays, emergency medical supplies, all the invisible systems he believed could save companies millions and help hospitals move faster. Back then, his ambition had felt romantic because it was still wrapped in promise. But promise, Claire had learned, did not pay for new tires when her car broke down on Interstate 90. Promise did not stop her friends from asking, with soft pity in their voices, whether Ryan had found a real executive position yet. Promise did not make her feel proud when Mark Ellison arrived at a dinner in a tailored suit, spoke easily about acquisitions, and picked up the entire check without looking at the total. Ryan closed his laptop slowly, sensing the silence before she said anything. "Claire," he said, gentle but exhausted, "I know this has been hard." She let out a small laugh, not loud, not happy, just sharp enough to make him lower his eyes. "Hard is when two people carry something together, Ryan. This feels like I am standing in the dark while you keep pointing at a door I cannot see." He rubbed his thumb along the edge of his wedding band, a habit he had when he was trying not to argue. "The door is there. I am close." Claire turned away from the sink and faced him fully. The apartment suddenly felt too small for the sentence she had been carrying for months. "You have been close for 3 years." Ryan did not answer. Outside, a bus sat at the curb, and headlights swept across the ceiling like passing water. He looked older in that moving light, not weak, not lazy, just tired in a way Claire no longer knew how to forgive. She wanted a husband who entered rooms with certainty, who did not have to explain why failure was only temporary, who did not ask her to believe in things no one else could see. She wanted ease. She wanted applause. She wanted to stop defending a man who kept asking for patience as if patience were an endless account she could keep withdrawing from. Ryan stood, walked to the counter, and picked up the envelope from the landlord without opening it. "I have a meeting Friday," he said quietly. "If it goes well, we can breathe." Claire looked at him then, and the sadness in her face had hardened into something colder than disappointment. "I married a promise, Ryan," she said. "I am tired of waiting for the man you keep saying you will become." The words landed softly, but they changed the room. Ryan looked at her as if he had heard the apartment door close before she even reached for her coat. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse her. He only stood there, holding the unopened envelope, while the refrigerator hummed behind him and their wedding photograph slowly curled at one corner. By the time March arrived, the cold had not left Chicago, but something inside their apartment had. It was not loud. It did not slam doors or shatter plates or leave a scene for the neighbors to remember. It simply faded from the corners, from the kitchen table, from the side of the bed where Claire used to leave her book open with a receipt tucked between the pages. Ryan noticed it in small absences. Her coffee mug no longer sat beside his in the sink. Her gray coat disappeared from the hook by the door. Her laugh, once quick and bright in the hallway when she was on the phone with friends, became a careful silence whenever he entered the room. On the morning of the divorce meeting, he tied his own navy tie in the bathroom mirror and saw the tired lines beneath his eyes more clearly than he wanted to. The suit he wore was dark, clean, and slightly loose at the shoulders, the kind of suit a man bought for interviews and funerals and days when life demanded he look composed. Claire was already dressed when he stepped into the living room. She wore a cream-colored coat, small pearl earrings, and her short brown hair brushed smooth behind her ears. There was no suitcase in her hand because she had moved most of her things over the past week while Ryan was at meetings. There was no wedding photograph on the refrigerator because she had taken it down 2 nights earlier and placed it face down in a drawer. "The appointment is at 10, she said, checking her phone. Ryan nodded. He wanted to ask if they could take one more walk around the block, one more drive along Lakeshore Drive, one more hour before 2 signatures turned years into paperwork. Instead, he picked up his keys. The law office sat on the 18th floor of a glass building near the river, with gray carpet, quiet lamps, and framed certificates arranged so perfectly they made grief feel administrative. The conference room smelled faintly of printer toner and lemon polish. Claire sat across from him, her purse resting on her lap, her fingers still. Ryan noticed she had already removed her ring. The pale circle on her finger was the only proof that something had once been there. The attorney explained the terms in a low, practiced voice. Assets, accounts, lease obligations, final review. Each phrase passed over the table like cold air. Ryan answered when spoken to. Claire answered faster. She did not look cruel. That was what made it harder. She looked prepared. Through the glass wall beside the reception area, Ryan saw Mark Ellison waiting near the elevators. Mark wore a charcoal suit that looked expensive without trying to look expensive, polished shoes, a silver watch, and the easy posture of a man who had never had to explain why tomorrow might be better. A bouquet of white tulips rested on the chair beside him. Every few minutes, he glanced toward the conference room, not with concern, but with possession. Claire noticed Ryan noticing him, and for the first time that morning, something like embarrassment crossed her face. It disappeared quickly. The attorney slid the final documents forward. Claire picked up the pen first. She signed her name with smooth, deliberate strokes, then placed the pen in the center of the table as though she had completed a business transaction. Ryan looked at the page. His name waited beneath hers, empty and patient. He remembered the first time she had written Claire Caldwell on a hotel registration card during their honeymoon in Michigan, laughing because the new last name still felt strange. Now she was signing it away without trembling. He signed slowly, not because he hoped the pen would stop working, not because he believed a miracle would enter the room. He signed slowly because some endings deserved to be witnessed, even by the person they were ending. When it was done, the attorney gathered the papers and told them the decree would be processed by the court within the standard timeline. Claire stood, smoothing the front of her coat. Ryan remained seated for a moment, turning his wedding band around his finger. Then he removed it and placed it on the table between them. The small circle of gold made almost no sound when it touched the wood. Claire looked at it, then away. "Were you ever proud of me?" Ryan asked. His voice was quiet enough that the attorney pretended not to hear. Claire's hand paused on the strap of her purse. For 1 second, the room softened around her face, and Ryan saw the woman who had once brought him coffee at 2 in the morning and whispered that she believed in impossible things. Then the elevator bell rang outside, and Mark stepped into view with the flowers in his hand. Claire lifted her chin. "I wanted to be," she said. There were sharper things she could have said, louder things, but none would have cut as cleanly. Ryan nodded once, as if accepting a verdict. Claire walked out first. Mark handed her the tulips, touched her elbow, and guided her toward the elevator. Ryan watched through the glass as the doors closed on them, their reflections swallowed by brushed steel. He sat alone in the conference room with his ring on the table, the city moving beyond the windows, and for the first time in months, he did not feel the need to follow. Ryan left the law office without calling anyone. He did not text Claire, did not look back toward the elevator, and did not wait in the lobby hoping she might return with regret in her eyes. Outside, Chicago moved as if nothing had ended. Office workers crossed the river with paper cups in their hands. Buses sighed at the curb, and a hard gray sky pressed low over the glass towers. Ryan stood on the sidewalk for a moment with his coat open to the cold, the empty place on his finger tucked inside his palm, and for the first time since his marriage began to fall apart, he understood that silence could be more than pain. It could be a door. He went back to the apartment that afternoon and packed only what belonged to him. 2 suits, 4 white shirts, a box of notebooks, his laptop, a framed photograph of his parents, and the old leather folder where he kept the first sketches of Carter Meridian Group. He left the wedding photograph in the drawer where Claire had placed it face down. He did not turn it over. By evening, he had moved into the small office he had rented on the 7th floor of a brick building in River North, a narrow room with scratched hardwood floors, exposed pipes, 1 desk, 2 chairs, and windows that looked toward an alley painted silver by melting snow. There was no bedroom. There was a worn brown sofa against the wall and a vending machine at the end of the hallway that sold weak coffee for $2. For 3 weeks, that office became his home. He changed shirts in the bathroom before morning meetings, shaved over a small sink with cold water, and slept under his coat when the heat failed after midnight. Every day began before sunrise. He walked 7 blocks to save money on rides, bought 1 black coffee and 1 plain bagel from a corner shop, then unlocked the office while the rest of the building was still dark. The city outside had not changed, but Ryan had. He no longer worked with the nervous hunger of a man trying to prove his worth to someone who doubted him. He worked with the clean discipline of a man who had stopped asking to be seen. He called hospital administrators from a spreadsheet of old contacts. He rewrote proposals until the language became sharper, simpler, impossible to dismiss. He studied delivery failures, emergency supply delays, warehouse routing errors, and the quiet cost of systems that looked efficient on paper but failed people in real time. When investors said no, he wrote down why. When they did not answer, he called again the next week. When one meeting ended after 12 minutes, he walked back through sleet with his folder under his coat and spent the night improving the presentation instead of feeling sorry for himself. Claire became a presence he trained himself not to follow. Her name still appeared sometimes in mail forwarded from the old apartment. Her favorite tea remained in a cabinet he had not meant to bring. Once, near midnight, he found a receipt from a restaurant they used to love tucked inside his notebook, and for several seconds he simply held it between his fingers while the rain tapped against the window. Then he placed it in the trash, emptied the trash, and returned to work. Not because the memory meant nothing, but because it had already taken enough. Spring came slowly. Snow turned to dirty water at the curbs. The bare trees along the river began to show thin green at the tips. Ryan lost weight, then gained it back in muscle from early morning runs along the lakefront, his breath white in the cold air, his shoes striking the path with a rhythm steadier than thought. He bought one better suit when he could afford it, dark navy, tailored close enough to make him stand straighter. He learned to speak less in meetings and let numbers carry the room. By May, a regional clinic network agreed to test his platform. By June, delivery times dropped enough for the chief operating officer to call him personally. By July, that call became a contract. Ryan was alone in the office when the signed agreement arrived by email. There was no champagne, no applause, no one leaning over his shoulder to say they had always believed in him. The only sound was the old air conditioner rattling above the window and a siren passing somewhere below. Ryan read the message twice, then closed his eyes, not smiling exactly, just breathing as if a weight had shifted from his chest to the floor. On his desk, beside the laptop, his wedding band sat inside a small black box. He had not thrown it away. He had not kept it for hope either. It was there as proof that something had ended, and that he had not ended with it. While Ryan was teaching himself how to stand without anyone clapping, Claire was learning that applause could echo in an empty room. At first, life with Mark Ellison looked exactly like the life she thought she had chosen. He took her to rooftop restaurants in River North where the lake turned black beneath the windows and waiters remembered his name before he gave it. He sent flowers to her new apartment on the Gold Coast, ordered wine without asking the price, and introduced her at charity lunches as the woman who finally understood what ambition looked like. Claire smiled at the right moments. She wore cream coats, quiet jewelry, and the careful expression of a woman determined to prove that she had not made a mistake. When her friends asked if she was happy, she told them Mark was generous, connected, and already talking about a house in Winnetka with a long driveway and a kitchen filled with morning light. Yet happiness, she discovered, was harder to perform when the audience went home. Mark's charm had a schedule. It appeared at dinners, in elevators, around clients, and in front of people whose names mattered to him. In private, he became distracted, then impatient, then strangely absent even when he was sitting 5 feet away. His phone was always face down. His smile tightened whenever she asked simple questions about business. Some nights he came back from meetings smelling of rain and expensive coffee, placed his keys in a glass bowl by the door, and walked straight to the balcony without saying hello. Claire told herself that successful men carried pressure differently. She told herself that this was what real power looked like up close. Then the small cracks began to show. A black card was declined at a restaurant on North Michigan Avenue, and Mark laughed too loudly while handing over another one. A leasing office called twice in 1 week, and he stepped into the hallway both times, lowering his voice until Claire could only hear pieces of sentences. Extension. Temporary delay. Next quarter. Do not put that in writing. A jeweler left a message about an unpaid balance. Mark deleted it before the message finished. He began asking Claire if she still had contacts from the hospital foundation where she had once volunteered, whether she knew anyone in procurement, whether she could get him into a donor breakfast without making it look obvious. She noticed then that he did not bring her into rooms because he admired her. He brought her because she softened him. She made him look stable. She made his ambition look warmer than it was. By late August, the apartment that once felt like proof began to feel staged. The marble counter was always clean because no one cooked there. The living room had a view of Lake Michigan, but the furniture felt borrowed from a catalog. Claire would stand barefoot near the floor-to-ceiling window at night and look down at the traffic moving along Lakeshore Drive, remembering the old 600-square-foot apartment where Ryan used to leave coffee rings on the table and apologize for them with tired sincerity. She had hated the uncertainty then. Now she missed the truth of it. One Thursday evening, rain tapped softly against the glass while Mark paced near the kitchen island, speaking to someone in a clipped voice. Claire sat on the sofa with the television turned low, not really watching until a familiar name moved across the bottom of the business channel. Carter Meridian Group secures National Hospital Logistics contract. She sat forward slowly. The anchor spoke of a Chicago-based technology firm founded by Ryan Caldwell, now expanding into medical supply routing across multiple states after reducing emergency delivery delays for a regional clinic network. A photograph appeared on the screen. Ryan stood beside 3 hospital executives in a Navy suit, his short hair neat, his expression calm, his hand resting lightly on a folder embossed with the company name. He did not look lucky. He looked prepared. Claire forgot to breathe for a moment. The room seemed to narrow around the television, around the name she had once signed away, around the man she had accused of becoming no one. Mark turned sharply. "Turn that off," he said. Claire did not move. His voice softened when he realized how quickly he had spoken. "I just mean the news is all noise. They make anyone sound important now." But his eyes were not on her. They were on Ryan's photograph, and for the first time since Claire had met him, Mark looked less like a man above the room and more like a man afraid of who had just entered it. Claire reached for the remote and lowered the volume, but she did not turn the television off. Ryan's face remained there in the quiet, composed and distant, while Mark opened a cabinet he did not need and pretended to look for a glass. Outside, rain ran down the window in thin silver lines. Claire looked from the screen to the reflection of herself in the dark glass, and the woman staring back at her did not look chosen. She looked late. The invitation arrived in early October, printed on thick ivory paper with raised black lettering and a gold seal that caught the afternoon light on Claire's kitchen island. The Arden Foundation Gala, Manhattan, formal evening attire, benefit dinner for hospital emergency access and medical supply equity across the United States. Claire read the card twice before she noticed the way Mark was watching her from the other side of the room. He had not brought it home because he wanted an evening of charity and music. He had brought it home because 3 names on the host committee could save him, or at least delay the collapse. He kept dressing in expensive fabric. For weeks, his phone had carried a different kind of silence, the kind that came after calls went unanswered. He spent mornings in meetings that ended too quickly and evenings standing by the window with a drink he barely touched, staring at Lake Michigan as if the right contact might appear in the water. When Claire asked about the gala, Mark smiled with the brightness he saved for rooms full of strangers. "Everyone important will be there," he said. "A few hospital board members, private equity people, donors from New York. It is the right room." Claire placed the invitation back on the counter and felt a small chill pass through her that had nothing to do with the season. The word hospital no longer felt neutral. Not after the business channel. Not after Ryan's face had appeared on the screen with the calm authority of a man who had outgrown every doubt she had placed on him. She did not say his name. Mark did not say it either. That made the silence between them heavier. "Who was hosting it?" she asked. Mark lifted one shoulder as if he had not checked the list a dozen times. "The foundation. Several sponsors. It is New York, Claire. There are always sponsors." He walked to the bar cart and rearranged 2 glasses that were already straight. Claire watched his hands. There had been a time when she believed confidence was loud, effortless, and polished. Now she could see the small labor behind it, the constant adjusting, the fear hidden under a perfect cuff. On the night they flew to New York, Mark wore a charcoal suit and spoke to 2 men in the first-class cabin as if the trip had been casual, as if his entire future did not depend on being seen beside the right people under the right chandelier. Claire sat by the window and looked down as Chicago disappeared beneath clouds, its lights shrinking into a pattern she could not read. She had packed a white dress because Mark said it photographed well, but as the plane crossed over dark stretches of the Midwest, she kept thinking of the old apartment, Ryan's laptop glowing in the kitchen, his shoulders bent from work she had mistaken for failure. By the time they reached Manhattan, the city was already glittering under a cold sky. The Arden Hotel rose above the avenue in limestone and glass, old money polished for a new century. Inside, the lobby smelled of lilies, waxed wood, and expensive perfume. Bell carts rolled soundlessly across marble. Women in evening gowns moved through the revolving doors with small clutches in their hands, while men in dark suits checked watches that cost more than Claire's first car. Mark's hand settled lightly at her back, not tenderly, but strategically, guiding her into the room as if they had both been placed there for display. Claire had cut her hair a little shorter that week, brushing it smooth behind her ears in a style that made her face look composed even when she was not. The white dress fit elegantly, modest and clean, the fabric moving softly as she walked. She caught her reflection in a mirrored wall and saw exactly what Mark wanted others to see: a graceful woman beside a successful man. Then she looked closer and saw the unease in her own eyes. In the ballroom, golden light poured over round tables set with crystal, white roses, and folded cards bearing names she recognized from newspapers and hospital boards. A string quartet played near the far wall. Waiters passed with silver trays. Conversations rose and fell in careful waves. Mark changed instantly, becoming warmer, taller, more animated, shaking hands with men who smiled without promising anything. Claire followed beside him, nodding, smiling, listening. Twice, she heard someone mention Carter Meridian Group. The first time, it came from an older woman in emerald silk who said, "Mr. Carter's platform saved our regional network nearly 9% in delivery overhead." The second time, it came from a man near the bar who murmured, "Carter is the reason half the board flew in." Claire's fingers tightened around the stem of her water glass. She told herself there were many men named Carter. It was a common name. A name could belong to anyone. Then a hotel attendant passed behind her carrying a leather folder embossed with the gala seal and said quietly into his headset, "Mr. Caldwell's elevator is ready." The room did not stop. The music did not change. No one else seemed to notice. But Claire felt the sentence move through her like cold air beneath a closed door. Mark, standing beside her, went still for half a second before lifting his glass to his mouth. He drank without tasting it. Claire looked toward the private hallway beyond the ballroom, where two attendants stood waiting near a set of tall doors. Somewhere behind those doors was the truth both of them had avoided naming, dressed in a black suit, walking calmly toward a room that had already learned to stand for him. The tall doors near the private hallway opened without drama, and that was what made Claire's breath catch. No announcement came first. No burst of music, no crowd turning as one. Just a soft movement of brass handles, a hotel attendant stepping aside, and Ryan Caldwell walking into the ballroom as if he had never needed a room to forgive him. He wore a black suit cut clean across his shoulders, a white shirt bright beneath the golden lights, and the same deep navy tie Claire remembered him tying in their old bathroom mirror on mornings when he was trying to look more certain than he felt. But there was no uncertainty in him now. His short hair was neat, his expression calm, his pace unhurried. Two men in tailored suits followed several steps behind, not close enough to seem protective, but close enough to make it clear they were waiting for his next decision. A woman from the host committee crossed the room to greet him, smiling with both hands extended. Ryan accepted the greeting with quiet courtesy, leaned slightly to hear her over the music, and nodded once at something she said. Around him, conversations shifted in tone. People did not stare openly, but bodies angled toward him. Shoulders straightened, glasses lowered. Names began moving through the air in whispers Claire could not fully catch, though one word reached her again and again like the toll of a bell: Caldwell. Mark saw him a second later. Claire felt the change through the hand Mark still kept at the small of her back. His fingers tightened for less than a breath, then relaxed too deliberately. "Well," Mark said, his smile returning in the polished shape he used when he needed control. "That is an interesting coincidence." Claire did not answer. Her eyes were fixed on Ryan, not because she wanted him to look poor, not anymore, But because her mind could not place this version of him beside the man she had left in a gray conference room with a ring on the table, Ryan turned. Then, as if pulled by the weight of her attention, for the first time that night, their eyes met across the ballroom. The string quartet moved into a softer passage. A waiter passed between them with a silver tray, and for one fragile second the room seemed to blur around the two people who had once shared rent, grocery lists, cold mornings, and impossible plans. Claire expected something from his face. Surprise, pain, a flicker of the old warmth. But Ryan only held her gaze with a stillness that did not accuse her. He looked at her as someone might look at a closed house from a passing car, remembering that he had once lived there without wanting to go back inside. Mark stepped forward before Claire could speak. Ryan Caldwell, he said, making the name sound smaller than the room had made it. I almost did not recognize you without the laptop and the desperate pitch deck. The words were not loud enough to stop the music, but they were loud enough for the small circle near them to hear. A silver-haired donor looked down at her program. A hospital executive beside him went still. Claire's face warmed beneath her makeup. Ryan looked at Mark with the same calm he had given the host committee. Mark, he said, as if acknowledging a weather report. Mark laughed once, too quickly. You clean up well. Are you here networking too? These rooms can be difficult when no one knows what to do with you. Claire turned toward Mark, a silent warning in her eyes, but he was already smiling at his own performance. The old Claire might have admired that confidence. This Claire could hear the strain beneath it. Ryan did not defend himself. He did not mention the business channel, the contract, the host committee, or the way half the room had adjusted around his entrance. He simply reached for a glass of water from a passing tray and said, I hope the evening is useful for you. That single sentence landed harder than any insult. Mark's smile thinned. Useful, he repeated. That is generous, coming from a man who used to beg for meetings. Ryan took a sip of water and placed the glass back on the tray. I asked for opportunities, he said quietly. There is a difference. Claire looked at his hands. Steady. Empty. No ring. No tremor. The memory of the law office rose inside her so vividly she could smell lemon polish and printer toner. She wanted to say his name, but the name felt heavier now, belonging not only to the man she had loved, but to the man she had failed to understand. Before Mark could speak again, a hotel attendant approached from the private hallway carrying a leather folder embossed with the gala seal. He stopped beside Ryan and lowered his head with practiced respect. Mr. Caldwell, the board is ready for you. They are waiting near the stage entrance. The small circle went silent. Mark's expression did not collapse. It froze, which was worse. Claire saw his eyes move from the attendant to the folder, then to the host committee members watching from across the room. Ryan gave the attendant a slight nod. Thank you. I will be there in a moment. Then he turned back to Claire, not to Mark, and for the first time his voice softened enough to reach only her. You look well, Claire. The kindness should have comforted her. Instead, it opened something she had spent months keeping closed. Ryan walked past them toward the stage entrance, and the space he left behind felt colder than the October night pressing against the hotel windows. The stage lights softened first, then brightened in a slow wash of gold across the front of the ballroom, drawing every conversation toward silence. Claire remained beside Mark near the edge of the room, but it no longer felt as if they were standing together. Mark had shifted half a step away from her, his shoulders squared, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the stage entrance where Ryan had disappeared. Around them, guests turned toward their tables, programs opened, chairs moved quietly over the polished floor. The string quartet lowered into a final note, and then the master of ceremonies stepped to the podium with a smile that belonged to a man about to say a name everyone important already knew. Claire held her water glass with both hands because one hand alone no longer felt steady. On the large screens behind the podium, the Arden Foundation seal appeared, followed by photographs of hospital loading docks, rural emergency centers, medical supply teams, and nurses moving through bright corridors. The images were simple, almost ordinary, but Claire felt them building towards something she could not stop. The master of ceremonies spoke about access, response time, and the invisible systems that determined whether help arrived when families needed it most. He thanked the donors, the board, the medical partners, and then he paused, glancing down at the card in his hand with a warmth that made Claire's stomach tighten. Tonight, "We are honored to recognize the founder whose work has changed the conversation around hospital logistics across the country," he said. The screens shifted again. This time, the name appeared first in clean white letters against a black background. Ryan Caldwell, founder and chief executive officer, Carter Meridian Group. Applause rose before Ryan even stepped out. It did not explode. It gathered, elegant and certain, the sound of a room acknowledging value without needing to be convinced. Claire heard Mark inhale beside her, quiet but sharp enough that she turned slightly. His face had lost its practiced warmth. The color had drained beneath his carefully controlled expression, and for the first time, his expensive suit looked less like armor and more like costume. Ryan walked onto the stage with the same unhurried calm he had carried through the ballroom. He shook the master of ceremonies' hand, accepted the small glass award without looking down at it for too long, and turned toward the audience. The applause continued. A hospital board member stood. Then another. Across the room, several people followed, not because they were instructed, but because respect had its own momentum. Claire stayed seated only because she feared her knees might not hold her. The screens behind Ryan changed to the Carter Meridian Group logo, then to a map showing service routes across Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and several more states marked in blue. The Master of Ceremonies explained that Ryan's platform had reduced delayed emergency supply transfers, lowered overhead for regional hospitals, and helped expand delivery coverage into underserved communities. Every sentence rewrote a memory Claire had kept of him. The laptop on the kitchen table was no longer desperation. The calls after midnight were no longer neglect. The tired eyes, the unpaid envelopes, the endless drafts, the meetings that came home empty, all of it had been foundation. She had mistaken the beginning of a cathedral for a pile of stone. Ryan stepped to the microphone. He did not clear his throat. He did not smile broadly. He looked across the room once, and though his eyes passed over Claire for no more than a second, it felt as if the whole past had been folded and placed gently out of reach. "Thank you," he said. His voice carried without strain. "When we started, we were not trying to make noise. We were trying to make minutes matter." The room went still in the way rooms become still when people stop listening politely and begin listening truly. He spoke of small clinics outside major cities, of supply routes stretched thin during winter storms, of nurses calling 3 vendors for 1 missing shipment, of hospital teams who deserved systems as reliable as their own dedication. He did not speak about sacrifice as if it made him noble. He did not mention sleeping on an office sofa or walking through sleet with a folder under his coat. He did not mention Claire, not once. That omission hurt more than exposure would have. If he had shamed her, she could have defended herself. If he had looked at her with anger, she could have called it bitterness. But he gave her nothing to fight. He stood there as a finished answer to a question she had abandoned. Mark leaned toward her without taking his eyes off the stage. "This is not what I was told," he whispered. Claire barely heard him. "What were you told?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be another polished version of panic. Mark swallowed. "Ellison Capital has been trying to get a subcontracting meeting with Carter Meridian for months. The Arden board was supposed to make the introduction tonight." His voice thinned on the final word. Claire looked at him then, truly looked, and saw that Ryan was not only the man Mark had mocked. Ryan was the door Mark needed opened. On stage, Ryan finished his remarks with a simple promise to fund 3 new regional access programs before the next fiscal year. The applause returned, stronger this time, filling the ballroom until the crystal glasses trembled faintly on the tables. Ryan stepped back from the microphone and nodded with quiet gratitude. He did not search for Claire's reaction. He did not need it. Under the gold lights of the Arden Hotel, in front of everyone Mark had hoped to impress, Ryan Caldwell became impossible to diminish. The applause followed Ryan even after he left the stage, not as noise, but as proof that the room had accepted him in a way Claire once refused to. He stepped down with the glass award in one hand and was immediately met by board members, donors, and hospital executives who spoke to him with careful respect. They did not lean in to rescue him. They leaned in to be near him. Claire watched from the edge of the ballroom, while Mark tried to recover whatever shape of confidence he had carried into the night. He adjusted his cuff, cleared his throat, and moved toward a hospital board member with a smile that appeared 1 second too late. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Claire did not hear every word, But she saw enough. The polite nod, the closed expression, the glance toward Ryan, the quiet ending. Mark returned with his jaw tight and his eyes bright with humiliation he would never admit. "We should leave," he said. Claire looked at him as if his voice had come from very far away. "You wanted this room," she said softly. Mark's smile turned thin. "This room has changed." No, she thought, looking across the gold-lit ballroom where Ryan was listening to an older nurse with his full attention. The room had not changed. She had simply learned who owned the silence inside it. Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Claire, do not make this emotional. We need to be strategic." That word, need, settled between them like a receipt for everything he had hidden. She saw the declined card, the hallway calls, the unpaid balance, the way he had used her warmth as decoration for his ambition. For months, she had told herself she had chosen strength. Now she could see she had only chosen shine. "I am done being strategic for men who call it love when it benefits them," she said. Mark stared at her, more startled than wounded. Before he could answer, Claire set her untouched glass on a passing tray and walked away. She did not know where Ryan had gone, only that the private hallway near the stage had swallowed him after the final round of handshakes. She moved through the ballroom as calmly as she could, past white roses, folded programs, and people discussing donations in voices soft enough to sound kind. Her reflection appeared and disappeared in the mirrored walls. White dress, short brown hair, pale face, eyes too honest now to be useful. At the end of the corridor, she saw him. Ryan stood near the private elevator with the hotel attendant beside him, his black suit framed by warm brass doors and quiet marble. The glass award was no longer in his hand. Someone must have taken it for him. He looked lighter without it, as if recognition had never been the thing he came for. "Ryan," Claire called, and her voice cracked on the second syllable. He turned. Not quickly, not hopefully, just turned. The attendant stepped back with practiced discretion. Behind Claire, the ballroom doors closed, softening the music into a distant pulse. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then all the words she had rehearsed in her mind collapsed into the simplest ones. "I am sorry." Ryan's face did not harden. That almost undid her. Anger would have given her a wall to press against. His calm gave her only a mirror. "For what?" he asked. Claire looked down at her hands, bare of the ring she had removed before the divorce was even final. "For not seeing you. For making your struggle feel like shame. For standing beside someone else because he looked like the life I thought I deserved." She swallowed, and tears gathered faster than she could hide them. "I thought I wanted success. But tonight, watching you, I realized I had been standing next to it before it had a name." Ryan breathed in slowly, his eyes moving once toward the elevator light above the doors. "Claire," he said, and the gentleness in his voice hurt more than distance. "You did not leave because I failed. You left because you needed me to look successful before you could respect me." Her lips trembled. I know that now. Please, Ryan, do not walk away from me like I walked away from you." The elevator opened with a soft chime, spilling warm light across the marble between them. It looked like the same line from earlier, the one she had crossed so easily in a law office with Mark waiting beyond the glass. Ryan did not step in yet. He looked at her fully, giving her the dignity of being heard, but not the comfort of being chosen. "I loved you when I had nothing the world applauded," he said. "And you taught me that love without respect becomes a room a man should not live in." Claire covered her mouth with one hand, trying to hold back the sound rising in her throat. "Can we start over?" she whispered. Ryan's expression softened, but his feet did not move toward her. "No," he said, "not cruelly, not triumphantly, just honestly. I have already started over." For a moment, the lobby was perfectly still. Then Ryan stepped into the elevator. The attendant lowered his eyes and pressed the button for the penthouse level. Claire stood outside the doors, tears bright under the gold lights, while Ryan gave her one final nod, not as a husband, not as a wounded man, but as someone who had finally returned himself to himself. The doors closed without a sound loud enough to blame. Outside the glass walls, Manhattan continued glowing, taxis moving like threads of yellow fire beneath the October sky. Claire remained in the lobby, surrounded by marble, music, and everything she once thought she wanted, while the man she had begged to come back rose quietly above the city, no longer looking down to see if she was watching.